My top 3 offensive and defensive dark horse under the radar football players for the Iowa Hawkeyes this coming season. Who could emerge as potential all Big Ten players by the season's end. Also, Dasonte Bowen commits to the Iowa Hawkeyes. We'll give our reaction and talk about Fran's success at the point guard position. Boy, that's something Iowa fans have been waiting for since the former Siena coach arrived in Iowa City, 12 years ago or so. So we'll talk about it all coming up during Week 166 of Brada's Branded Thoughts. This is From the Hawkeye of the Storm.
Are you a Hawkeye fan living in Story County? Do you feel isolated, like you're alone in a maze of red? Well, you're not the only one. And that's why we here at StoryCounty.news have launched a brand new section of our website, From the Hawkeye of the Storm, which will feature our weekly podcast, Brada's Branded Thoughts, as well as other Hawkeye-related content for all you Story County residents who bleed black and gold, or if you live in Western Iowa, Eastern Iowa, or somewhere else other than Ames and you're a Hawkeye fan, we'd love your support. All of our content is free, so again, give our Facebook page a follow, give it a like, and give our Twitter page a follow as well, at From the Hawkeye on Twitter. The more likes, the more follows, the more support we get, the more content we can continue to push out, and it's all free. It's From the Hawkeye of the Storm, hosted by StoryCounty.news, for the best Hawkeye content in the area.
Week 166 of Brada's Branded Thoughts. We are recording this just about, 4 or 5 days from July 1st. Can you believe that? We are dead in the middle of summer now, and in just a couple of short months, we will be talking live action college football once again. Hard to believe that time has kind of dragged on during this pandemic, but it has come right along, and we are getting closer and closer to football. So we'll talk football this evening. We're going to talk a little bit about my dark horse picks to be sort of breakout players this year. I know I could maybe get some backlash as far as that term dark horse, because some of my picks are not necessarily dark horses, but maybe guys who are flying under the radar who I could see elevating themselves to first or even second team Big Ten, all Big Ten status this coming year. But first, I want to talk about Hawkeye hoops. Iowa got a big-time commitment from Dasonte Bowen. Most media outlets and recruiting databases have Bowen as a 4-star kid. He's a guy who certainly gives Iowa some much-needed athleticism at the point guard position. This is a huge get for Fran, being an East Coast guy and a coach who has traditionally gotten great point guards out east when he was at Siena and UNC Greensboro and Lehigh. And for years, Iowa fans have kind of complained about Iowa not being able to attract the big-name point guards. He was close with Tyler Ulis years ago, and then, of course, Kentucky swooped in. He was conceivably close with DJ Carton, and, of course, we know where that went. But give Fran credit. Joe Toussaint, Aaron Ulis, things are starting to trend in a better direction. And now, with Dasonte Bowen, here's a kid who is a lot bigger than a guy like Ulis. I've seen some different markings as far as his height. I've seen anywhere from 6'1 to 6'3". He's bigger than Joe Toussaint. He's a guy who, my biggest impression of Dasonte Bowen, and I'm not on the recruiting trek, so I wouldn't be probably the best guy to talk to about what he brings or doesn't bring as it relates to other players in his class at the point guard position. But what he does bring that I have seen on tape is control. He is consistently under control. He can stop and take the mid-range jumper. He can shoot threes. He's a guy who certainly gets to the basket. And I really think his ability to get to the basket is going to be massive for Iowa, because we see a guy like Joe Toussaint who can get to the basket basically whenever he wants to. But again, what Joe hasn't been able to perfect is his ability to stay under control. Aaron Ulis is young. We really have no idea what to expect from Aaron. Anybody who says otherwise really doesn't know what they're talking about. We watched Aaron a little bit during parts of the Big Ten season last year, but it was so hit and miss. He was still a freshman playing during a COVID season. It was just an odd year, and Aaron potentially has 4 years left. Oh, he does have 4 years left of eligibility if he chooses to stay here for that length. And Joe Toussaint has 3 years of eligibility remaining if he so chooses to exercise it. So it will be interesting to see how Fran handles the depth at point guard in the coming few years. Do I think that Iowa can support all three? Probably not. I mean, not in this day and age of transfers. You think about how many guys are in the transfer portal. Last I heard, it was like somewhere around 1,500, which is ridiculous. Now, a lot of guys have committed. Some guys have not. We know Jack Nungy is headed to Xavier. We know C.J. Frederick is already at Kentucky. And there have been a lot of other moving pieces. Philip Rebracha, a guy from North Dakota, is now at Iowa. So the transfer portal is what it is. You're probably not going to see a scenario where Aaron Eulis, Joe Toussaint, and Dasonte Bowen are all here for more than a year at a time. Dasonte Bowen is a 2022 recruit. So again, theoretically, he could be here for 2 years of Joe Toussaint. He could be here for, 3 years of Aaron Eulis. Again, do I think that's going to happen? I don't. However, if Bowen chose to redshirt, he certainly could do that as well. And again, I think it kind of comes down to Iowa's needs, and is Dasonte Bowen willing to redshirt? I mean, I think it's pretty clear Fran's reputation across the country on the recruiting trail is he is a pretty much black and white guy. You know what you're going to get from him. He's going to be up front with you. And I think Fran, I would have a hard time envisioning a scenario where Fran is not up front with Dasonte. And obviously he would have been up front before this commitment came. And I say that because I would have to think that Fran's looking down the road, unless he knows something we don't know about Aaron Eulis and or Joe Toussaint. I would think he'd be looking down the road and saying, hey, Dasonte is going to be a freshman in 2022, but we're going to have basically a redshirt junior, a fourth-year guy in Joe Toussaint at the point guard position, and a third-year sophomore in Aaron Eulis at the point guard position. I would not be shocked to see Dasonte Bowen at least consider that option, and I would guess that Fran has spoken with him already about redshirting. But again, may the best man win, and I think Fran also understands that the transfer portal is so fluid that it may look like you have Joe Toussaint and Aaron Eulis today, you could lose both of them tomorrow. That's the day and age of college basketball, whether you like it or not. But nevertheless, huge get for Iowa. From a perception standpoint, it's huge. And let's be honest, this has been, I know people are still probably bent out of shape about the C.J. Frederick information, what may or may not have happened behind the scenes with that transfer, and certainly Jack Nungy leaving was a disappointment. We understood why he left. I think things are okay. I really do. I'm not here to break down the roster today, and certainly Dasonte Bowen does nothing for the roster this coming season. But when you look at what Fran's done, he's gotten Philip Rebracha, who was a guy who was very successful in the Summit League, and is now a guy who's going to have 2 years of eligibility. And Philip has told us that he is planning on staying for 2 years unless something happens and he explodes onto the NBA scene, which I don't think any Iowa fan would argue that would be a good thing for Iowa City and the Hawkeyes. But I don't see that happening. So you're going to see Philip here for most likely 2 years. Riley Mulvey reclassifies up. We had him on the show last week. So he could be here for potentially 5 years, and then you add again Dasonte Bowen. There's the Dix kid that could potentially be. I think he's probably towards the top of Iowa's 2022 radar right now. But they've gotten in on some other guys, and we've said this in the past. It looks like Iowa's got a shot with some of these 4 or 5 star guys. I will say this: what I've noticed of Fran in this recruiting period, and again, I'm not a recruiting guru, so I don't want to make myself out to be one, but what I've noticed for Fran is I feel like he's almost starting to, and again, I could be totally wrong on this, but it seems like he's starting to recognize his limitations, so to speak. He's starting to shoot more towards his league, if that makes sense. We saw him going after 5-star kids quite often. I think back to Trace Jackson Davis. They really pushed hard with him. Of course, Xavier Foster, you're going to push hard for an in-state kid like Xavier. The kid that went to Kentucky. I can't remember his name. Keon Brooks. That's who it was. I believe a 5-star kid as well. And they've swung and missed a lot on these guys. Another one, Jalen Suggs. We all know who Jalen Suggs is, especially after this past year. Fran has not been able to get those guys, but now he seems to, not want to say lower his expectations, but he's starting to be able to target guys who I think he's got a decent chance with. Dix is one example. Dasonte Bowen, of course, is another example. And Fran also realizes, I think like any other head coach right now, that your recruiting does not end at the player's commitment. It does not end the day that player signs, and it does not end the day that player arrives on campus, because the portal has changed things, and eventually you're going to see. We've seen it this year with the one-time waiver for the pandemic, kids being able to basically go wherever they want. That's what this has turned into. So Fran understands that, and I think by all accounts you've got to give Fran 2 thumbs up as far as what he's doing right now on the recruiting trail. At least I like it. And I think this roster is going to be okay. I mean, looking up and down this roster, Joe Wieskamp's gone. Tom Kakert told us that however long ago that we had him on 2 months ago. I think all Iowa fans kind of held out hope that maybe he would consider returning to Iowa City. He's gone. He had a tremendous showing at the Combine this week, including, I believe, a 26-point outing in one of the scrimmage games, which is very impressive for Joe. He also had an insane vertical, and he's a guy who's starting to emerge on draft boards. We're seeing him sneak into the mid to even early second round boards in on some scouting boards or mock drafts, if you will. And so he's gone, and Iowa's going to have to figure out a way to move past the era of Joe Toussaint. And I think Fran probably realized that a long time ago, and so he's preparing for that. But if you look up and down this roster, you've got Toussaint, you've got Ulis, you're obviously going to get Jordan Bohannon, who we think, at least from what Jordan has said and what Fran has said, Jordan can play primarily at the 2 this next season, which would be tremendous. Tony Perkins is going to provide some depth. I would not be surprised to see Tony play a little bit more at the 3. He's 6'4", a little bit undersized for the 3, but he's a great defender, and he's not necessarily that stop and pop shooter that Fran likes to have at the 2 spot, a la CJ Frederick, Jordan Bohannon, Josh Oglesby, Brady Ellingson, those types of guys. So I would not be surprised to see Tony in smaller lineups play at the 3. Connor McCaffrey is going to be a guy who's going to be able to go everywhere. This is going to be a year where there's a lot of flexibility. Fran has said that in the past, but with Luka Garza gone, Joe Wieskamp gone, that changes things. Sure, you could play Wieskamp at the 4 in a small lineup. You could play him at the 2 in a big lineup, but he's a natural 3. I think a lot of the guys Iowa has on the roster now for this coming season are a little bit more flexible. Again, Connor can play 1 through 4. Joe Toussaint's a point guard. Aaron Ulis is a point guard. We get that. Tony Perkins, again, 2, 3, could see him at either position. Philip Rebracha could see him at 4 or 5. Patrick McCaffrey can play at least the 3 and the 4, maybe even the 2 or the 5 in some lineups. I don't love him at the 5. Keegan Murray, 3, 4, 5. Chris Murray, potentially. We don't know what we're going to get out of Chris, but if it's anything close to what we're getting out of Keegan already, could see him maybe get some minutes at the 3, 4, or 5 at times. And again, what do we get out of Josh Ogundele and Riley Mulvey? I mean, that's really, those are 2 huge kind of question marks right now. But again, those are sort of dark horses, if you will, because I don't think a whole lot of people expect a lot out of those guys, but they're going to have to play. I mean, there's a reason Riley Mulvey is coming here a year early. It's not to sit on the bench, I don't think. And Josh Ogundele is going to have to really take a step forward if he's going to be Iowa's starter at the 5 position. Do I think he has the ability to? I have no idea. I mean, I hope. I mean, that's why he was recruited here. So those are all storylines to watch. The bottom line is Iowa's got to line up with flexibility. You've got to like that. And the point guard position is going to look a lot different, and the center position is going to look a lot different. if Fran sticks to his guns with playing Jordan primarily at the 2, and this is Joe Toussaint, Aaron Eulis and Joe Toussaint's team, it's going to be a completely different look. This team's going to play a lot different. I know, it's run and gun and run the score up. This is a different looking team. It's a more defensive team. It's a better defensive team. Certainly, the post presence is not what it was. There's going to be positives and negatives, but I think this is still early, at least looking at it from an early perspective. This is an NCAA tournament team. If Joshua Gundele can progress to a point where he's a starting Big Ten 5, and same with Patrick McCaffery. He's going to have to step into those roles. The guys who are really filling in the shoes of Joe Eastcamp and Luka Garza will obviously be huge. Will play a huge role in Iowa's success this coming season. All right, let's switch over to football for our second half of Week 166. My top 3 dark horses, or top 3 under-the-radar players on offense and on defense. These are, again, I'm not trying to say these are guys who you didn't expect to play well, but these are guys who are not getting a ton of national attention, and I think very well could be getting national attention by the end of the year. Number 1 on my list on defense, I'm going to steal a couple picks from our good friend Tom Kakert. One being Kayvon Merriweather. We had Jovan Johnson, former Iowa defensive back, on a couple months back. Jovan talked about what he sees out of Kayvon, compared him to Bob Sanders, which, yeah, I get that's a lofty comparison, maybe a little hyperbolic there, but he is a hard-hitting guy. He started to come into his own. He dealt with injuries a couple years back, and I think he's starting to evolve into that sort of trademarked Iowa defensive back guy who is just really solid and is going to have a chance to play at the next level. Here's a guy who is athletic, he's big, he's tall, he's got all the athletic traits you want in a Big Ten safety, and he's also got some wheels. So I would not be surprised to see Kayvon Merriweather. He's my number 1 defensive player to watch for that's flying under the radar, sort of, if you will, for this coming season. Expect big things out of Kayvon Merriweather. Would not be surprised to see him first or second team All Big Ten. Second one may be a little surprising to some people. Defensive lineman John Wagner. Look back at some of the spring tape with John, and if you need to, Google some of his highlights this spring. John has really taken a step forward physically. The dude just looks huge. And he's playing inside, he's playing outside. I'm not going to make a comparison to Drew Ott because he's not there yet. But when you look at him from a physical standpoint, he has what it takes to be, and I'm not going to compare him to A.J. Epinesa either, but a guy who can run inside and out. And we saw how effective A.J. Epinesa was at doing that. Now, again, I get it. He's not A.J., but I think that concept that Kelvin Bell and Phil Parker have ran here, especially with guys who can do it, like A.J. Epinesa, I think that concept could really, really fit in well for John Wagner. And I would not be surprised to see him be kind of the defensive player or the defensive lineman that takes the biggest step this offseason. We've heard good things about Noah Shannon. Y.A. Black is another guy. Certainly Joe Evans has gotten bigger and is trying to step into an every down role. But look for John Wagner to do big things this fall. And the third guy on my list for the defensive side of things is Dane Belton. Now think about this. Dane Belton had not had a spring practice prior to 2021. I mean, that is incredible. He got here summer of 2019. Spring of 2020 was canceled. And keep in mind, he played in 2019. He doesn't get spring last year because of COVID. He plays after a kind of a shortened fall camp, has a very good season, and now he gets spring. Keep in mind, Dane Belton was a guy who LSU was after. Some bigger schools were coming after this kid, and he picked Iowa. Expect big things out of Dane Belton. He's kind of playing that cash role that we saw Amani Hooker excel at in recent years. I would not be surprised to see Dane moved around as well. There's, you think about a guy like Xavier Williams from UNI. Maybe he's a guy who can slide down at the cash position. We've heard coaches talk about Matt Hankins doing the same thing. Depending on where Dane Belton excels, I could see him moving, whether it be up to safety if they need it, especially with health issues. If there's a health issue with Kayvon or Jack Kerner, I could see Dane Belton slide up to the safety position, and you could slide someone else down to cash. I think he's going to be one of those guys similar to John Wagner in that you can move him around, and I think his versatility is going to be a huge asset for this defense this season. Moving over to offense, my number one player, sorry Tom, I'm going to steal this from Mr. Kakert again, Mason Richmond. I have nothing to really gauge this kid. He's 6'6", close to 300 pounds now. He has increased in weight. I believe 296 was the official measurement the United States of America, the University of Iowa released this week. Freshman, right? He's a redshirt freshman, but he's coming in again with a spring and a lot of hype around him and a lot of healthy competition. I think the offensive line is one of those positions where competition is so important, because it's not like quarterback in that if you lose a battle, you transfer. Obviously, guys can stick around, but in this day and age, guys typically transfer if you lose a quarterback position battle. Guys like Mason Richmond probably can be moved. I mean, he can be moved from guard, he can move to tackle. As a center, we've seen, or as a freshman, we've seen guys like James Daniels do the same thing. We've seen Cody Ince do the same thing. Mark Kellenberger was able to play tackle guard. Mason Richmond is a guy who, again, I'm hearing a lot of hype around him. Hype is one thing, performance is another, I get it. But he is a dark horse offensively for the Hawkeyes this fall. Second player on my list on offense, tight end Luke Lachey. Why Luke Lachey? First of all, 6'6", 250 pounds, guy that kind of reminds me a little tiny bit of an undersized CJ Fedorowicz, at least from what we saw this spring. Pretty darn good hands, really big guy, and again, if he can improve on his blocking and certainly his route running will be will play a huge role in him seeing the field more, especially trying to get a position behind Sam Laporta. I could see Luke Lachey being a red zone guy and a guy that Spencer Petras could eventually develop a rapport with, again, inside the 20. I'm not saying he's going to take over as the primary tight end option. Sam Laporta, certainly, from what we've seen, has an opportunity to be the next great tight end at Iowa. And let's be honest, there is competition behind Lachey. We talked several weeks ago about how nice it was to see Josiah Meehan back on the field after some legal struggles in the offseason. He's back on the field. Elijah Elverton has been in the program for several years now. We may see him as well. So Luke Lachey is going to benefit from healthy competition, but what I saw this spring, look for him to take a jump and secure that tight end 2 position this fall. And third, this shouldn't be a surprise for anybody who's listened to me over the past few months, wide receiver Max Cooper. Here's a 5th-year guy. Now, this is the hardest one for me to really gauge. This could be a total bust, okay? Could be a total bust because he has got so many guys around him that fit a similar mold to what he presents physically. A guy who's under 6 foot tall or right around there. And, I mean, look, Tyrone Tracy, Nico Reganey, Quavon Matthews is a guy who has made some strides from what I've heard this summer. You look at a guy like Deontay Vines, maybe he can make a jump. And then, of course, we've heard good things about Charlie Jones on offense. We saw what he could do on special teams last year. There will be plenty of competition at wide receiver, but there's a reason Max Cooper is coming back for a 5th year, besides the fact that he has dealt way too many injuries for a kid that just seems to be a real class act, really good in the classroom. I expect Max Cooper to make an impact. Max Cooper could be an insurance policy. Remember, Iowa's losing Amir Smith-Marset. Of course, they get Charlie Jones back, who's probably the best punt returner in the Big Ten. But it only takes one play for a guy to go down. Max Cooper has proved he can return punts and potentially return kicks as well. So those are my top 3. Top 3 on offense. Again, Mason Richmond, Luke Lachey, Max Cooper as far as under-the-radar dark horse players this coming fall. And again, I'm kind of giving this pre-fall camp, pre-media days, all that good stuff. This could change. This could ebb and flow, so to speak, as we get closer to the start of the season, certainly into fall camp. And then on defense, top 3 players to watch for under the radar: Kayvon Merriweather, John Wagner, and Dane Belton. All of those guys, expect those guys to make a major impact this season, and I would not be surprised to see any of them, or even all of them, very soon end up on some national radars for not only all Big Ten, but potential draft radars. When you think about Kayvon Merriweather, he has a big season, very easily could end up on draft boards pretty high. Same with Dane Belton. John Wagner, maybe. Certainly the guys on offense would need to do a lot more to prove that this early. Mason Richmond and Luke Lachey, very young. Max Cooper has not really proven himself yet, but all of those guys can make an impact for Iowa this season. So we appreciate you joining us for week 166 of Brada's Branded Thoughts. We will be back soon with week 167. And stay tuned. We've got lots of things in the calendar coming up Hawkeye related. We've got Iowa Media Days coming up. Before you know it, Big Ten Media Days will be here. And again, 2 months out from the start of football. Really just like 1 month out from the start of fall camp. How crazy is that? So it's going to be here before you know it. So continue to stay with us here at From the Hawkeye of the Storm. From the Eye of the Storm, Ames, Iowa, as we continue to give you Hawkeye coverage and give our thoughts as we approach the fall season, both football and, of course, the winter season in basketball. And one other thing I wanted to throw in here before we sign off. I want to give a shout out to everybody working with Iowa athletics, whether it be sports information, certainly the staff. I don't think people realize, and I don't even realize because I'm not there, I don't think people realize how much of a burden this past 15 months has put on them. I think last year with what the Big Ten did in shutting things down for a while and making people think that we weren't going to have a season, people really got defensive and protective over their football, over their athletics. And look, I was at the forefront of that, saying that I thought absolutely the players should play. I stand by that opinion. I think that it was for the best interest of the players. But I will say this, whether or not it was for the best interest of the players, I guess that can still be up for debate. But what I will say is this: it involved a lot of stress. Playing the season, although I think it was for the best of the players and probably even the staff, there was so much testing, so many different mandates that had to be followed. The Big Ten allowed it to happen, but there was also a lot of testing and a lot of protocol to have to follow. And listen, for anybody complaining about wearing a mask and yet they are defensive about not having their sports canceled, you need to wake up and realize that these are human beings on the other side of your television screen. And they're trying to protect their health, the health of those around them. And certainly, even though I believe that these athletes and these staff members benefited themselves from being able to have a season last year, it didn't come with a lack of stress and a lack of sacrifice. So as we return to sort of a normal, we're not back 100% yet. I want to make that clear. We are not back as a society 100% yet. There's a lot of stuff going on in India and in these different countries that's very, very sad and very concerning. I'm not going to push the fear narrative because a lot of people are getting vaccinated. A lot of people are fully vaccinated. But we're not there yet. We're not there yet here in this country, and we're not there yet as a race of humans. And so it needs to be emphasized that when we get fall football back, and it's going to be back this year, and it's going to be close to normal, I think we're probably going to get full crowds, full capacity. I'm not involved in those decisions. I think we will, though. Same with basketball. We're going to have a full schedule. I don't think we're going to have any interruptions because of COVID. And when we get that back, take a moment, take it all in, and appreciate it. Okay? Because these joys that you experience watching college football, college basketball, they are not rights of yours. Okay? Those people on the other side of the screen can stop, not play whenever they want. And yes, that's going to affect your joy, but they're playing on their own initiative and their own accord. So appreciate it. Appreciate it because we've seen how sad and depressing it can be when you don't have something like sports to keep you going during difficult times. So all I'm saying is appreciate this coming sports season, whether it be college football or college basketball, because we know how quickly it can be taken away. Thank you for listening to week 166 of Brada's Branded Thoughts here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We will talk to you soon.